Think about a completely blank sheet of paper, just, nothing on it. Seems pretty unremarkable, doesn't it?
Totally ordinary, yeah.
But imagine that exact piece of paper held a secret, a hidden message. And it was tucked away somewhere really unusual, like inside the heel of a shoe.
And that right there is our starting point. It's fascinating how this everyday object opens the door to this whole clandestine world of hidden communication.
Exactly.
So in this deep dive, we're exploring the really intricate realm of secret inks, especially during a period of intense global conflict and espionage.
We're going to see how something literally invisible could have such massive consequences. We're basically tracing the journey from that single blank piece of paper all the way to the complex science behind making messages disappear and reappear.
And also that constant struggle back and forth between intelligence agencies trying to create these inks and, well, the other side trying to detect them.
Yeah, the sources you shared really paint a vivid picture of that.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to unpack that journey and understand the really critical role and, frankly, the dangers of this invisible way of communicating.
And the stakes were just huge. I mean, these weren't just party tricks or anything. Secret inks were a vital tool for spies.
Right.
And whether they worked or failed could dramatically affect individuals, maybe even the course of nations.
Okay, so let's get into that initial mystery. The blank paper. We've got this woman in Mexico, suspected of German espionage.
Okay.
She gets searched at the border, and nothing seems obviously suspicious, except for this seemingly empty piece of paper hidden in her shoe heel. What does that hiding place tell us straight away?
Well, it screams deliberate concealment, doesn't it? Hiding something small, easily overlooked. It suggests she knew that, the more obvious places, pockets, bags, whatever, would be checked.
So an immediate red flag.
Definitely. This isn't just scrap paper someone forgot about.
Right, so the immediate thought is probably secret ink. But here's where it gets tricky. At the time, the common wisdom was, well, you just apply heat, right? Basic lemon juice ink, that kind of thing.
The old school method.
Exactly. But British intelligence had apparently reported that German chemists were way ahead, developing much more advanced inks that wouldn't react to heat.
Ah, okay. So there's this doubt right from the start. Is it simple or is it something new?
Yeah, this uncertainty. What does that tell us about the intelligence landscape then? Were they always playing catch-up, unsure of what the enemy could actually do?
I think it really highlights how dynamic this hidden tech battle was. The understanding of secret inks wasn't static.
Right.
It was constantly evolving. One side innovates, the other scrambles to figure it out. The fear here was that this blank paper represented that next step, that German ingenuity.
So instead of just holding it over a candle, they decided they needed expert help.
Yeah.
They found a chemist in Washington.
Smart move.
Can you imagine being that chemist? You're handed a blank piece of paper and told, find the message. What are you even thinking? What kind of chemistry applies here?
Well, it really underscores that intelligence agencies couldn't just rely on, trench coats and secrets. They needed science.
Yeah.
Bringing in a chemist was vital. It shows they recognized their own limits, that maybe the old tricks weren't enough anymore.
And the first attempts? They set up a makeshift lab in a basement, apparently. Kept trying heat over and over.
Of them, nothing.
Nothing happened. Must have felt like a complete dead end. What does that initial failure suggest about how effective those German advances might have been?
It really emphasizes that relying on the old established methods wasn't going to work. It strongly suggested the Germans were making strides, pushing the boundaries, forcing the Allies to, learn new tricks.
But then, the breakthrough. The chemist suddenly exclaims, here are traces of writing. Faint, barely visible characters just appearing.
Wow. That must have been a moment.
Incredible, right? Validation. What did that faint success immediately confirm for them?
Oh, absolutely. It confirmed the suspicion wasn't just paranoia. Secret ink was being used, and crucially, it wasn't easily detectable by heat, or maybe not at all by simple heat.
The hunch was right.
The game was definitely on.
And then, a new problem. The writing starts to fade.
Oh, no.
This fragile message, appearing and then disappearing again, makes it clear they need to move fast. That's where the photostat machine comes in.
Ah, like an early photocopier.
Exactly. The immediate need to capture this fleeting text before it vanished entirely.
Yeah.
Why was the fading such a critical issue, beyond just losing the message.
Well, the ephemeral nature of some developing agents is key here. Some reactions are temporary. It meant time was absolutely critical,
Right.
not just for deciphering, but for even proving the message existed later, for analysis, maybe comparing it to others. It highlights how unstable some of these chemical secrets could be.
So once they had those photostats, they hit another snag. The language.
It wasn't German or English.
Nope, not Spanish either. It turned out to be modern Greek letters.
Greek, wow.
Which meant they needed another layer of expertise, a translator. What does using Greek tell us about the scope of these spy networks?
It just adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it? Shows how global these operations were.
Yeah.
You needed chemists, analysts, and linguists with diverse skills. It wasn't just a German-American thing. It was a worldwide puzzle they were trying to piece together.
And finally, the message is decoded. It's addressed to someone, a Mr. in San Antonio. Tells him to go to Galveston to collect a huge sum of money, $119,000.
That's a lot of money back then.
A fortune. And it seems related to some business deal, and it mentions the IWWW, the industrial workers of the world.
Okay, so a seemingly mundane message on the surface. Business transaction.
Right. Seems almost ordinary. Why go to all the trouble of secret ink and hiding it in a shoe for that?
That's classic tradecraft, isn't it? Hiding the secret communication within the noise of seemingly normal correspondence.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. The business transaction provides cover for the money transfer. It's all designed to slip past routine checks without raising eyebrows. Blend in.
But the implications were huge. This single piece of blank paper found in a shoe confirmed their worst fears. Sophisticated German agents were operating inside the U.S. using advanced secret inks.
That must have been a major turning point.
Yeah, it had to change how they viewed the threat, right?
Oh, absolutely. It galvanized American intelligence efforts. Suddenly, secret ink wasn't just a theoretical problem the British were dealing with.
It was real here and now.
It was a tangible threat right on their doorstep, demanding immediate action, a real wake-up call that their existing defenses might not be good enough.
Which leads us straight to the British. The immediate reaction was, we need help from England. They were seen as the leaders in fighting this invisible ink war. Why were the Brits so far ahead in this specific area?
Well, this transatlantic cooperation becomes really crucial. The British had simply been dealing with German secret inks for longer, since the start of the war, really.
They had more experience.
They had a significant head start, more experience, established protocols, developing expertise. They were already deep into this invisible war.
And that's how Dr. S.W. Collins enters the story, described as England's foremost secret ink chemist.
The expert's expert.
He comes over to the U.S. basically to train American chemists in this shadowy science of detection. What did Collins bring with him beyond just the chemistry know-how?
His arrival was huge. He brought not just the science, but crucially first-hand experience.
Right.
He knew the German methods, the variety of inks they were using, the sheer scale of their operations. He offered practical insights that you just couldn't get from a textbook.
And he paints a pretty stark picture of Germany's chemical strength at the start of the war, emphasizes their early success with inks that were, for a while, basically undetectable. What gave Germany that initial edge chemically?
Well, they had a really strong foundation in chemical industries and research even before the war.
Right. Think Bayer, BASF.
Exactly. They could pour significant resources into developing these clandestine communication methods backed by a really robust scientific infrastructure. They had the brains and the industrial capacity.
And their communication system using these inks sounds incredibly complex. Cover addresses, sending letters in triplicate.
Triplicate, why?
Apparently, so if one got intercepted, the others might still get through. And they even had ways to check if a cover address had been compromised.
Wow, that's like a whole secret postal service running in parallel.
Doesn't it? What does that level of complexity tell us about how important this was to them?
It tells us it was a massive priority. The German intelligence apparatus poured huge resources into this. Secret communication wasn't an afterthought, it was vital to their strategy. Required meticulous planning and execution.
And the scale must have been just shocking for the Allies to discover the realization that potentially thousands of these hidden messages were just sailing past their censorship efforts.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. Think about the volume of invisible information flying around.
What kind of impact could that undetected communication have had on the Allied war effort.
It created a huge intelligence blind spot. I mean, if you can't read the messages, you don't know the enemy's plans, their troop movements, what their spies are finding out.
A massive vulnerability.
It could have had really serious consequences for military operations, for overall strategy. You're fighting partially blind.
And finding the reagents, the chemicals needed to reveal these inks, was apparently a slow, painstaking process.
A constant game of cat and mouse, you said.
Exactly. Germany innovates with a new ink. The Allies desperately try to figure out the chemical key to unlock it. Why was it so hard to just, reverse engineer them quickly?
Well, initially it was very reactive. The Allies were playing defense. They'd capture a message, then try to figure out the specific formula the Germans used.
Right.
Each new ink might need its own long process of analysis, experimentation, trying different chemicals until something worked. It was like finding a unique key for every single new lock Germany created.
But it wasn't just about the ink formula itself, was it? The spies got smarter about hiding the materials too, moving way beyond just carrying a little bottle of liquid.
Exactly. As detection got better, concealment had to get better too. Spies had to get incredibly creative.
Which led to some really ingenious methods.
Leveraging everyday objects, things no one would look twice at.
We hear about things like potassium ferrocyanide hidden inside a tube of toothpaste.
Potassium ferrocyanide. Okay, for our listeners, that's a specific chemical, right? An iron compound. What makes it useful here?
Think of it like a reactant. It can react with another chemical, maybe one used as the invisible ink itself, to produce a visible color.
Ah, okay.
So hiding it in toothpaste looks totally normal. Or inked disguised within a cake of soap. Maybe the soap itself contained one part of the reactive pair.
So you just wash your hands and get your ink ready. Clever.
And then there's the really sophisticated stuff. Impregnating clothing, silk lingerie, handkerchiefs, even neckties, infused with the secret ink chemicals.
That is incredibly subtle. How would a spy actually use that? They can't just write with their tie.
Right. So the clothing would be treated with a chemical solution, maybe one part of the ink system, and then dried, making it invisible.
Okay.
To use it, the spy might dip a plain piece of paper in water, or maybe a specific solution, then press the treated fabric against the damp paper.
So the moisture activates or transfers the chemical from the fabric to the paper.
Exactly. The water reacts with the chemicals in the fabric, transferring the invisible ink onto the paper. It's a way to carry the potential for ink without carrying any suspicious liquid.
Ingenious. Minimal risk.
That case of the iridescent stains on the black necktie is a perfect example. It took specialized analysis just to realize those faint, shimmery marks were ink, a silver-based one.
Specialized analysis. You mean like spectroscopy, shining light on it?
Precisely. Spectroscopy is basically analyzing how light interacts with a substance. Different elements absorb or reflect light differently. It's like a unique light fingerprint.
So even tiny traces of silver would show up under the right kind of light analysis.
Even if you couldn't see it, and simple chemical tests missed it. Yes.
Wow.
And it wasn't just clothing. They found writing hidden, on envelope flaps, under postage stamps.
Well, they're stamps, the classic spot.
Even between the layers of a split postcard or pasted underneath photos or newspaper clippings glued into letters.
It really shows you had to scrutinize everything. Every single detail of a letter or a personal item could be hiding something.
Absolutely. Forced intelligence to become incredibly meticulous. No corner left unturned.
Which really emphasizes this cat and mouse game, doesn't it? Germany was constantly pushing for the perfect ink.
Right, one that could only be developed by one specific regent, making it almost impossible for the Allies unless they stumbled upon that exact chemical.
What was the strategic goal there? Just maximum security?
Maximum security through chemical specificity. The idea was, even if the Allies tested a letter with a whole battery of their known developers, nothing would show up.
Unless they had that one magic bullet.
Exactly, the one specific key for that specific lock.
And that leads us to these code names, F and P inks. Highly concentrated silver-based inks. You mentioned they were highly concentrated. Why did that make them harder to detect?
Well, if it's highly concentrated, you need much less of it to actually write the message.
Ah, smaller quantities.
Tiny quantities, which makes it much harder for standard chemical tests, which might be looking for a certain threshold amount of silver or whatever, to even register its presence.
Like finding a needle in a haystack, but the needle is microscopic?
Pretty much. In the case of George Bacon, it's a fascinating, kind of tragic example of this P ink in action. He was a spy operating between England, the US, Holland.
Okay, what made his case stand out?
Bacon's story really shows the human side of this tech war. He was using this advanced ink, P ink, but apparently didn't fully understand it himself, couldn't even develop it.
So he was just a courier, essentially, or a low-level user.
More like a cog in the machine, relying entirely on the tech developed by others, getting instructions from a handler in Holland named Schultz. Okay, and Schultz even warned him specifically not to take these socks, which were impregnated with the ink chemicals, to England.
But he did anyway.
He did anyway. Seems like a massive blunder. What does that tell us about the pressures, or maybe the psychology of being a spy?
It just highlights human error, doesn't it? Even trained agents make mistakes. Maybe overconfidence, maybe carelessness, maybe just bad luck. But in espionage, small mistakes have huge consequences.
And when they searched him, they found this bottle of argurol.
Argurol, isn't that like an old antiseptic, mildly silver-based?
Exactly. So it contained some silver, similar to the P ink. He claimed it was just medicine. It almost worked as a deception.
Almost. So how did they nail him?
It wasn't until they took those socks, soaked them, and analyzed the resulting solution. That's when the spectroscopy came in again.
Ah, the light fingerprint.
It revealed the specific chemical signature of the P ink in the sock water, which was different from the silver compound in the argurol bottle. The game was up.
So the socks betrayed him?
Pretty much. He confessed, but interestingly, he claimed he never actually developed the ink himself.
He didn't know how.
Apparently not. But he did mention seeing secret writing developed once in New York. Said it involved 2 brown bottles and created these heavy white fumes.
2 brown bottles. Had any idea what those might have been? And the fumes?
Likely the 2 specific chemical reagents needed to react with the silver P ink and make it visible. Brown bottles often mean light-sensitive chemicals.
And the heavy white fumes.
Probably a byproduct of a pretty strong chemical reaction, maybe even hazardous. It suggests the development process itself wasn't trivial and might even leave its own traces.
So even reading the message could be risky or revealing.
Possibly. And Bacon's story has this weird postscript too. He was initially sentenced to death in England.
Standard for spies back then.
But the US government intervened, got him released, sent back to the States, where he just served about a year in prison in Atlanta.
Really? That seems lenient. Shows the complexities of wartime diplomacy, I guess.
It does. National interests, legal differences. Who knows what went on behind the scenes?
Oh wait, there's more.
Yeah. Years later, he writes this letter, offers his own version of events, corrects some minor details, and claims he was deliberately sending misleading information back to Germany.
Get out! So a double agent? Or just trying to save his skin later?
Who knows? It throws another layer of doubt and intrigue onto everything. How much was real? Was he playing his own game all along? It's a classic espionage riddle.
In that world, information is just never straightforward, is it? Always layers upon layers.
Definitely. And Bacon wasn't alone. There were other notable cases showing these evolving tactics. Pickard, he tried hiding his ink in a scented bottle.
Scented? Why?
Mixed it with alcohol and perfume, hoping the strong, normal smell would mask any chemical odor and throw investigators off during a search. Using sensory deception.
Clever idea. Did it work?
Not in his case, eventually. And then there was Alfred Hahn. He carried the same type of ink Bacon used, but hidden in bottles labeled gargle and toothwash.
More everyday items.
And he also had it impregnated in his clothing. And he actually managed to get 3 letters with secret messages past the Allied censors before they caught him.
3. So his methods were working, at least for a while. Shows how challenging detection still was.
It really does. And we even have records of, like, an instruction letter found detailing exactly how an agent should develop the ink from an impregnated handkerchief.
Like a recipe.
Pretty much. Use boiling water, add a specific ammonia solution, step-by-step instructions. It even told them how to prepare the paper surface first.
Wow. That shows a real system of support and training for these agents in the field, doesn't it? Making sure they could actually use the tech.
Yeah, ensuring even agents without chemistry labs could use the sophisticated stuff. Practical know-how was key.
So the British method for detection at this point, it sounds like it was still heavily reliant on traditional intelligence work.
Seems like it. Identify likely suspects first, then meticulously examine their mail or belongings.
But that's reactive, isn't it? You have to suspect someone before you look closely.
Exactly. And even if they found suspicious paper, they still had the problem of figuring out the specific developer needed. They could only really discover new reagents if they captured ink and figured out how to reveal it. a major limitation.
Yeah, they're always one step behind the ink creators.
There's this description of a demonstration using colored strips of paper, each treated with a different invisible ink. And they'd apply various known developers. A developer would only make its corresponding ink visible, leaving the others blank.
Ah, visually showing the problem. Unless you have the exact chemical key, the message stays hidden.
Precisely. It perfectly illustrated why they desperately needed a more universal solution.
Which brings us to this critical need for a general regent, something that could, theoretically, develop any secret ink.
They realized without that, they'd always be playing catch-up in this scientific battle, as they called it. Why was a universal developer the holy grail?
Because it would neutralize the German advantage. If you have one method to reveal any hidden message, regardless of its specific chemistry, the secrecy advantage is gone. It levels the playing field or even tips it in your favor.
And the urgency for this becomes crystal clear with that decoded cable from Bern. German agents trying to get intel on French troop movements.
Using what kind of ink?
Using water.
Just water.
Just plain water as secret ink. How alarming is that?
That's terrifyingly simple. Water is everywhere, leaves almost no trace when dry. How could you possibly detect that reliably?
Exactly. If the Germans had mastered a reliable way to write with, and more importantly, develop messages written in water, that was a huge leap.
And the implication was even scarier, right? If they could develop water.
They probably had that universal developer everyone was looking for. What's the logical connection there?
Well, the thinking was, if you have a chemical process sensitive enough to react with something as inert and common as water residue on paper, then that same process would almost certainly react with the more complex chemicals used in all the other known secret inks. It suggested a developer with an incredibly broad spectrum.
And this wasn't just speculation. Other intelligence sources apparently confirmed this fear. The Germans might have cracked it.
Which led to a really dire assessment of the situation for Allied spies.
Suddenly, their own secret inks, their lifeline, become a massive vulnerability. How did this potential German breakthrough change the risk calculation for them?
It meant their supposedly secure communication method was potentially wide open. Any message they wrote could, theoretically, be read by the enemy using this universal developer. The risk of capture of compromised operations just skyrocketed.
And it all leads to this incredibly urgent, almost desperate plea from British superiors. It's quoted as something like, "For God's sakes, find this general regent. Beg America to join us in our researches."
Wow, for God's sake, that really conveys the panic, the gravity of the situation.
Doesn't it? It underscores the perceived threat. They needed American scientific muscle collaboration immediately.
It was seen as absolutely critical. A scientific challenge requiring the combined brains and resources of both nations. The future of their intelligence ops, maybe even the war's direction, seemed to hang on finding this thing.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, you really get a sense of the incredible ingenuity on both sides, don't you? Creating these inks, hiding them, finding ways to reveal them.
It was a constant, high-stakes scientific arms race, fought with invisible weapons on tiny scraps of paper. Amazing.
The aha moments really stand out, that blank paper suddenly revealing text.
The sheer cleverness of hiding chemicals in toothpaste or lingerie.
And just the intricate chemistry behind it all, creation and detection.
And it definitely makes you think, doesn't it, about hidden communications today. Maybe not chemical inks, but digital secrets, hidden data.
The invisible messages that might still be flying around, and the ongoing efforts to find them.
Which leads to a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. Imagine if today, someone discovered a truly universal method. Something that could reveal any hidden message, whether it's encrypted data, steganography in images, whatever.
Wow. What secrets might suddenly come to light? How would that fundamentally change everything we think we know about information, privacy, and security in our modern digital world?